Greetings loyal subscribers and honoured guests. We've reached episode 26 of Covertape Chaos Zzapped this week, which means that season 2 is coming to a close and I will be taking a bit of a break until 2023. We still have 3 more full games from this tape to check out before then though, and even during the off season I will still have other C64 related content for you to watch, so it's not all bad. Before we get on with the rest of the video, I just want to thank anyone who has watched, liked or commented on any of these episodes on either YouTube or Facebook. It means a lot to me. My channel is too small to be monetised or even noticed very much, so without your support I probably wouldn't have felt motivated to keep making these throughout the years. That's enough of that sort of talk though, let's get started looking at those games. We begin with Batalyx from Jeff Minter and Llamasoft. I have to admit that I have found some of Jeff's games a bit too complicated or obtuse in the past. They normally make sense once they've been explained to me, but they aren't immediately intuitive to just get stuck in and understand. I think for the most part though, Batalyx may just be his most accessible game yet. It is essentially made up of 5 different mini-games that all have different goals in order to be considered completed, which is usually a certain number of levels that need to be beaten. You have an overall timer ticking down at the bottom of the screen, but you have to have beaten all the different games before it reaches the end. And as the timer empties, the games get harder. So you should prioritise the games that you are less proficient at to the beginning so that they are less challenging. It's quite a clever idea. As for the mini-games themselves, they include one where you have to blast enemies to earn dots, but your fire propels you in the opposite direction and crashing your ship into enemies takes away any dots that you've earned. Then there's a new version of Attack of the Mutant Camels where you need to defeat 4 separate waves of the dromedaries without any reaching the right hand side of the screen. There's also one where you have to match a sequence of directions with the joystick, and this is the one I struggled with the most because my analog Logitech pad that I use wasn't accurate enough. The remaining 2 see you trying to turn a grey corridor into a rainbow colours, and one where you were trying to stop orbs from moving by changing the direction of coloured squares. I wasn't great at this last one either, to be honest. If you press 6 on the keyboard you will be taken to a visualizer that freezes the timer and allows you to take a breather if the action gets a bit much for you, which is a nice touch. I quite enjoyed 3 of the 5 mini-games and the others either need a different joystick to be able to play them or just a bit more practice for me to get on with them. On the whole I thought Batalyx was a cool game with a lot of replay value, especially as there are 5 different skill levels which see you having less time overall to beat the games. On level 1 you have a whole hour, which is good for practice runs, and on level 5 you only have about 5 minutes. The Zzapped review crew were quite enamoured with Batalyx. Gary Penn concluded his thoughts with, "Batalyx is a perfect example of Jeff Minter at his best." Whereas Gary Liddon had this to say about it. "Overall one of the star releases of the year. The game got a final score of 94% and a summary of yet another Minter classic. I agree, I really enjoyed it." Next up is Gribbly's Day Out, and this is the second time that I've spoken about this game in this series, with the first being the very first episode where I looked at the Zzapped sampler. Back then it was a special demo version of the game, but this time it's the full thing being given away. You control Gribbly, a little amphibian creature on one leg who has to venture out of his cave and round up all of the missing Gribblets before something terrible happens to them. He can hop about on land or he can float through the air, but you need to be very careful not to collide with anything or Gribbly will die extremely quickly. Once you find a little lost Gribblet, you walk up and press fire on them, and then you backtrack to the cave, land on one of the platforms and drop them off. You then repeat the process 7 more times in order to beat the level. There are strange creatures roaming around that make life more difficult, and they can be killed by shooting bubbles at them. Leave them alone for too long and they mutate into something nastier, so it's best to deal with them early on. The other hazard that you have to contend with is the psionic web, which for all these years I thought you just had to find a way around. I've only just discovered that you can turn sections on and off by pressing little controls nearby them. Even with this newfound knowledge, Gribbly's Day Out is still a tricky game. Zzapped awarded the Special Day Out version of the game a score of 89% when it was re-released on the Racket Budget label. While it's never been one of my personal favourites, I still think it's a decent game. Finally, we have Nythyhel, which is another text adventure. This one sees you diving into the world of paranormal investigations. If you can get out of the office at the start of the game, that is. I played around with this game for about 10 minutes before getting stuck, and it turns out I hadn't realised there was another room to the south with a computer in it that I needed to get a password from. As I have said many times before, this sort of adventure game really isn't my cup of tea. I do think the premise of this one is rather cool though, as there appear to be elements of Lovecraftian cosmic horror in it later on. I wasn't able to track down any reviews of the game, so I don't really know how well regarded it is in the adventure gaming circles. So there you have it, Season 2 is now over. I'll be back with Season 3 in the new year, and I'll probably give it a bit of a revamp. In the meantime, I'm going to be looking at the various Codemasters Quattro compilations once a fortnight for the rest of 2022, including the one with Dizzy on it, which is a game I really do not like. I hope you will join me for those. In the meantime, take care.